Welcome to our PowerPoint on communication skills for the Academy of Medical Educators. My name is Kirsten Broadfoot and I'm the Director of Communication Skills for the Academy of Medical Educators. Our session today will use this PowerPoint and some of the slides material within it for this afternoon. You'll notice that the title of this PowerPoint is Challenging Conversations and Contexts, Managing Diverse Emotions, Values, Beliefs and Interests. And these are the kinds of conversations we'll be working with in these workshops. First of all, let me just recall the learning objectives for this workshop. As I said earlier, we'll be focusing on communication skills, specifically relationship-centered communication skills, to help communicate respectful dissent and relational repair, especially when we're working with groups with diverse beliefs and power gradients. We will also be applying these skills in different standardized patient and colleague cases, which feature diverse perspectives, values, perhaps differences of opinion, and also highly emotional conversations with team members and learners. Finally, alongside communicating and practicing, we'll be also working on goal-based effective feedback techniques for peers, supervisors, and learners. One caveat I want to say for this entire presentation is although we do refer to providers and patients and healthcare, these skills are always readily available to you in any relationship that you encounter. So you can use them at home, at work, with your friends, etc. Please feel free to do so. So just that one caveat as you go through this. This is not just about clinical care, it is also about how we communicate in the workplace, no matter where that is. We have some session materials for you to prepare for the workshops. They include a reading on relationship-centered skills from Beach and Inouye, this particular presentation, and then also we sent through a communication skills checklist which we'll be using for the session, and you'll build your skills and goals around that particular checklist, as well as some peer feedback guidelines and process. And I believe there's a couple of documents which will be sent to you regarding those two things. Our process and philosophy for these sessions, as I said earlier, it is grounded in relationship-centered care. And you'll notice, first of all, that I'm not saying patient-centered or doctor-centered or provider-centered or scholar-centered. I'm really focusing on what happens in between people. So how do we make meaning and how do we create actions between each other? We focus on communication as a skill. It's not innate. It's not something that we are necessarily born with. If you recall, when you see little babies, they don't come out communicating. We do practice nonverbal communication as our primary and our primal form of communication, but actually learning how to make meaning with each other and interacting is a skill that we develop over the course of many years. When we think about communication skills training, then we want to make sure that it is learner-centered because we each come to interactions with a different set of training, a different set of experiences because of our lives. We also want to make it skill-based, that we can provide very concrete, specific feedback to each other, make it interactive and experiential and reflective so that we practice and we watch and we give feedback and we practice again. This is really about experimenting and trying to learn different things to add to our own repertoire of skills. Finally, as I said, that final loop is that feedback loop. So we can't always see so clearly when we're in an interaction. And so hearing how the way that we interact lands with another person can be incredibly valuable for us. From the reading on Beach and Inouye, you'll notice a few things. First of all, when we discuss relationship-centered care, we're focusing on meaningful relationships, and that's across power dimensions and social realms. As I said earlier, while I might reference patients and providers in healthcare, I really wanted you to think more broadly than that and consider how you interact with learners, peers, and even community members. It is grounded in values for clinical and all interaction, and the primary value that we involve here is personhood of all participants. That is to recognize that everyone is a person. And I know that sounds very simple and maybe even trite, but sometimes we forget and we don't necessarily see each other clearly. Alongside this, authenticity is important, remembering that everyone is unique, even in ourselves, and really being honest to ourselves. It's so very important in especially conflicted situations when we want to think strategically and act strategically to really become inauthentic and not who we think we are and even who we want to be. As a result, we're not talking about detached concern, we're talking about empathy and affect and emotion and recognizing that these are valuable and inherent and valid pieces of any form of relationship and communication. We also want to think about reciprocal influence and how it is that we affect each other and how we grow from each other and learn from each other. And finally, that we have a very real need to be present and honest. We're talking about genuine relationships. As earlier, I referenced this strategic nature of communication, and while that can happen and while that is something that is purposeful around communication, it's very important to be present, because if you're not present, then you can't pay attention to how it is that your actions are affecting a particular communicative episode or an interaction or a relationship. And in that moment, you lose awareness and the ability to change. As a result, one of the things you'll notice from this afternoon in our workshops is that communication skills training is different. It has its own theory, it has its own discipline, it has its own subject matter and methodology. It's also pretty difficult in terms of being able to really look at ourselves, because it's really closely bound to our self-concept and our esteem and our style. As a result, just as we are unique and complex individuals, communication is also inherently complex, and you're never an expert. And even myself, in terms of, yes, I have a PhD in communication and I've studied it for a very long time, every interaction, every person brings something new. And so we are in a constant evolution, a constant learning, if you will, of how to be with each other. This requires reflexivity. And as a result, really being able to focus on what you're doing and think about what you've done. And if you can find the evidence in any conversation, especially in highly emotionally charged ones, you can affect change immediately. Really sticking close to what you hear and what you see and what you feel is important. You'll notice we'll also rest on parallel process in terms of walking the talk. So you'll see your coaches and your peers engaging in very similar communication skills that you are also engaging in as you're in any of these standardized kinds of interactions. So thinking through some of the skills that you have in your checklist. And the first few sections are introductions, agenda setting, and gathering information. Or really figuring out where you are and who you're with and what you're there for. So we have 5 skills down here: greeting appropriately, eliciting a mutual agenda, using open-ended questions, pausing, and reflective listening. And these 5 skills really ground us in terms of figuring out where we are. So really focusing on whether we know who we're talking to, what it is that we're really here to discuss, complaints, concerns, worries, and then using those what and how and why questions to encourage another person's story. Right? Oftentimes when we're in very purposeful or very focused or even conflicted conversations, we want to jump right in and say what we're there for. But just taking those first few minutes to figure out where you are and why you're here and where the other person is can really help an interaction go much more smoothly. Alongside that, pausing or reflective listening when someone else is talking really smoothens the process. First, it shows that you are listening and that you're contributing meaningfully. It's very easy for us to say, okay, as we go through an interaction, but that's not really moving the interaction forward or making a connection with someone. We think that it does, but all we're saying is that I'm here. And sometimes we're saying, will you just please hurry up and get your talk turn over so I can talk? So really being present in those first few moments can set an interaction off to a good start. Then we have sustaining relationship skills. As I said, this is a relationship-centered curriculum, and part of this is about respecting another person's circumstances and adapting to it. So noticing when people pull away, when they stop, when they start to get emotional about something, and really adapting to it, even adapting to your environment. If someone complains about being bright in there, maybe offering to shut down the lights a little bit or move somewhere else if it's too noisy. Just really paying attention to the other person and where you are. Alongside that, empathy is important, and even in terms of you don't necessarily understand the person's situation or even necessarily feel particularly close to what they're suffering, but at least understanding and expressing some concern about that state or that situation. And empathy doesn't have to be beautiful words. Empathy can be silence and concern and even nonverbal. And so really thinking about how can you be there for someone, even begin to understand where they might be living in that moment, is central to our understanding and demonstration of empathy. Once we've gathered information and we've thought about where we are and what another person is feeling or what they might be experiencing, then really thinking about how can we move forward. And this is where these skills of sharing information and negotiating a mutual plan of action come into play. We have 4 things on this particular slide. Using appropriate language to the person that you are talking to. Chunks and checks in terms of sharing information, especially important information, and very small pieces, and then checking in with a pause and asking a question to make sure that you have a back and forth kind of understanding. Are you still on the same page with this other person? Eliciting the other person's perspective and opinion on specific options. So not necessarily dictating this is how it's going to work out and this is what we're going to do, but really about here are a few suggestions. What do you think about these? What do you think might work given where we are right now? And they can run the gamut, including no action at all. So if you just want to leave it where it is and have people think about it and then come back and have another conversation, that's also an option. Finally, negotiating a mutual goal. So what is it that the two of us or three of us or four of us really want to achieve here, and how can we make that work, considering we have different resources, different perspectives, different beliefs? Trying to find that mutual goal or that orienting goal can be incredibly important, especially as you move forward. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in how we're going to make things better that we don't think about the ultimate destination or where it is that we want to be going with somebody. And then closing and forward planning. So how does it we exit that interaction? And we have one skill down here, which is really about wrapping it up. Sometimes you run out of time. Sometimes things become too intense. But how can you come to a point of understanding before you leave that interaction? Realizing that all conversations happen in series. There will be another conversation after the one you're just about to exit. So summarizing all of what you understand so far, that page that we've gotten on, or maybe the page that we've fallen off, or how can we get back onto what it is that we've discussed? And have we really heard the same thing? Have we established a common meaning or a common mental model for how we're going to move forward? And then clearly outlining how we will move forward. Who's going to be doing what, when, how, where, these kinds of things, so that everybody leaves that conversation knowing what the next steps are and when we'll be back in touch. So if I can give you any final advice in the next two slides for this session, it is this. First of all, this is your session. It's learner-centered. So really experiment and be adventurous and be respectful of yourself and of others and of the context. It's so easy to think, oh, this is not real life. This is just me role-playing. That doesn't get you anywhere. It really doesn't. So really bring your whole self to it and give it a go. Just try something new. There's a lot of brain and experience trust in these rooms, and this is a very safe environment. So please be authentic and collaborative and really use this opportunity to try something else that you've never tried or wanted to try but haven't had the opportunity. Remember, these are your cases, your patients, your interactions, your peers, your responsibility, your kind of care and your kind of communication. We're not about building robots, we're about finding out what works for you and what can advance you or take you somewhere that you've never been before. How can we expand your own toolbox or your repertoire of skills? Now, I won't promise you it's going to be easy because it's going to be an adventure. So something that we like to show people is this 4-stage model of learning. The first stage is awareness, and hopefully this presentation and the materials that you get prior to the session will help you with what's going to happen. We'll then have some consciousness raising as you start to get closer to the session in terms of all that's involved and what you'll be hopefully working on. And then as you get into the small groups, it's going to be awkward. I'm not going to lie to you. It's awkward sitting in a small group. It's awkward talking to someone with someone watching you. It's awkward filling out a checklist. But then there'll be feedback and there'll be practice and there'll be reflection. And before you know it, you'll be in the swing of things. And you'll become consciously skillful. You'll learn this technique of being able to be present and also think about what it is that I want to have achieved here when I leave this interaction with this person. That's a very powerful thing. You'll then have another opportunity to reflect on that again. What did you do differently? What could you have done differently? What will you take away? And hopefully you'll have an opportunity to integrate all you learn in these afternoon sessions in the rest of your life, in terms of your workplace, in terms of your family life, in terms of your patient care, whatever it is that you do, because that's really the gift. Thank you so much for spending this afternoon with us. We look forward to working with you and hope to see you soon. Thank you.